streets are all aglow tonight in Ukaipa, where stars are bright. The band is warming up the scene. We're ringing in 2025 so keen.
Happy New Year and welcome to episode number 9 of Ukaipa 360. We are covering an incredibly important topic today. Social media has forever changed how local governments inform and interact with the communities they serve. Some of these developments have been positive, while some are seen by many as so negative that social media may actually be unraveling the very fabric of our society and our system of government. Local governments are left to grapple with how to adjust to new challenges, such as the rampant spread of misinformation over social media and vicious personal attacks aimed at elected officials and employees. The result has been record levels of distrust of government, division within communities, a drastic reduction in the number of qualified individuals willing to step up and serve as elected officials, and an exodus of local government professionals away from the public sector into the private sector where they can make more money without facing defamatory public attacks. While some government agencies have responded by burying their heads in the sand, pretending that nothing has changed and continuing with business as usual, it is clear that government at all levels must adapt. But perhaps not all is lost. Many local government agencies are tackling this brave new world head on, and that is where our guest today, Sam Toles, comes in. Sam Toles is a social media guru. He is a former elected official and communications executive at companies such as Bleacher Report, MGM, Vimeo, and Paramount. More recently, he is the founder and CEO of Civis Social, a company that teaches cities all over the country how best to navigate social media in order to improve communications, transparency, and trust in local government. Sam, it is an absolute honor to have you with us here today.
I am so excited. I have been a fan of your podcast since episode 1, so we finally made it happen.
Hey, I appreciate that. No, we lucked out. You were in town this week, and just thrilled to have you here in person.
Really glad to be here.
Let's dive right in and talk about the problem, the dark side of social media as it pertains to local government. It's something that cities everywhere, including Ukaipa, grapple with. A rampant spread of misinformation and sometimes disinformation, false accusations and attacks on elected officials and staff, the impact that has on trust in local government, but also on morale within government organizations. In fact, it's so bad that very many public professionals state that as the thing they or dislike the most about their job, right? We've seen recently how this can lead to dangerous situations. I mean, we had 2 attempts on the life of a leading candidate for president of the United States, and no matter what your political leanings are or what party you belong to, that should never be acceptable in the United States of America, right?
And it just happened to El Cajon. They had someone attack city staff, public safety with a car.
Wow. Yeah. No, I mean, it has found its way to local government, that vilification of individuals in the public space, the politics of personal destruction, where people are not satisfied to focus on an issue. It has to be personalized against the individual. If you have a different opinion than I do, then there must be something wrong with you. You must be on the take. There must be some corruption going on, and I'm gonna attack you. And where that is where it most commonly plays out is on social media, right? Let's talk about that a little bit. You've been on a little bit of a tour of the country with Civis Social. I think you are addressing a major pain point of a lot of local governments. What stories are you hearing out there?
Well, I would say that the thing I hear most when I was just in Oklahoma. I'm here locally helping a city. We're in Kansas and Kentucky. It's the same story. That's the thing that surprised me most. The challenges are the same. The pain point is the same. The sentiment is the same. The hopelessness is the same. I feel like everyone in local government has had their share, and they're tired and they're exhausted and they want to give up. And I'll tell you, I use a very simple analogy. when it comes to social media and how to think about this as a local elected official or somebody in local government management or even on the front lines. Star Wars, right? We have to think about the technology that powers social media as the force. It is agnostic. The people who own Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, they're not deliberately putting their fingers on one side of that equation or the other. They're not looking to create negativity. They've created a tool. They've created a powerful tool, a force, if you will. And what we see in society and residents also, how many people that live in Yucaipa or elsewhere are exhausted. They're tired of getting into these arguments with people who don't share the same political values and shrieking at one another. Social media's unique characteristic is it's created a space. Like if you saw somebody, let's say you're on the left side of the political spectrum and you see somebody in a MAGA hat walking down the street, you're not going to go up to them and say, "You're a terrible human being and I want to tell you all the things that are wrong with you," because that's not what we do in civil society. But creating a technology that basically gives people a degree of anonymity or safety to say what they feel in their hearts or to express their frustrations to strangers. And you know, government does not do a great job of being connected look, we know this, Chris. The people that work here in Yucaipa, your police officers, your code enforcement people, the people who do the day-to-day activity that keep this city awesome are not just civil servants. They are the neighbors of the people that they serve, right? You wouldn't go up to your neighbor and disparage them, right? That's just not civil behavior. But social media allows for this anonymity or this feeling of it's okay to behave in this way. And so going back to that Star Wars analogy, we see the dark side of the Force everywhere. Just like in Star Wars, you don't see the rebels. They're hidden on different bases. They're just trying to survive. And I think it's the right analogy here. What we do see is the Death Star and the stormtroopers and Darth Vader and the big ships. And if you're trying to fight against something that feels that ominous and that powerful, it's really easy to say, I can't win this game. I'm going to give up. Civi Social is all about being Yoda, right? I am not I once was a powerful Jedi who ran Bleacher Report and has created the most powerful social media accounts on the planet. But I'm getting old and I'm getting up there in years. And I could sit in my little cave in Tatooine, or in my case in Florida, South Florida, and, you know, live out my days. But I decided to do something for the betterment of society. And that is to create a tool, a system, a program that empowers local government to grab the Force and fight back. You know, the Empire, you know, Return of the Jedi, whatever the analogy. Like, if you understand how these platforms are architected, and you mentioned I worked at Vimeo, I've actually seen the algorithm. I know how it's programmed. I know what it's thinking. I know how to work on it. When I was at Bleacher Report, I was in daily contact with high-level executives at TikTok and Instagram, Meta, and Google. They wanted to show us how to best use the algorithm. So I understand how the machine works. And when you understand the Force, you can use the Force for good.
I really want to dive into this because it's interesting. I love the analogy, by the way. I was, born in '76, and Star Wars was, I lived
74
Star Wars
here,
as a kid.
just a little older than you.
But no, it's true. How do you fight back against so much misinformation? Most governments just can't keep up with it. It's you might have a PIO, or maybe if you're a larger city, you have a whole communications department, PIO department, and historically, the game was, you send out a press release, and then later, okay, well, now you've got a post on Facebook. The world has changed. That's not sufficient anymore, right? And so I feel like, there is so much out there, so many different platforms and people posting constantly, and so much of it is misinformation. We over the last couple of years here in Yucaipa, we've really gone through some political challenges. And there's an organized group here in Yucaipa that has, whether intentionally or whether they truly believe this false information, has consistently put out very negative, in many cases accusatory information about our elected officials and staff, just patently false information. And as the city, when you try to correct that through normal means, you're just, there's no way to, through traditional means, to sufficiently fight back, right? And so it excites me when I hear what you're doing with Civi Social, because I believe that most cities don't have the tools they need to be effective with communication in this world today, right? We have to change the way that we approach our residents and communicate with our residents in the ways that they receive and digest information today. And it's not just a matter of protecting the city's reputation. That's not what it is. But we have an obligation to our taxpayers and our residents to communicate with them so they know how we are spending their resources, right? So the services that we are providing for them, and to tell our story. And you talk a lot about telling your story, and so I'm excited to hear more about that as well.
Yeah, look, I think there's so much to dive into. Let's address what I call the STPs first.
Oh.
The STPs are the same 10, 20, 30 people, the organized group, the people who spread information.
Right.
They are not representative of the broader sentiment. The largest portion of people in a community are likely thinking about local government in a positive way. How can I say that with confidence? Well, you mentioned historic lows polling about trust in government,
Yes.
trust in media.
Yes.
Gallup just did a poll in September. Traditional media, television, news, journalists, lowest it's ever been. 31% of people say they trust those people.
31%.
Yeah.
That's it. Wow.
It's really low.
Wow.
Supreme Court, similar. Congress, worse. Presidency, regardless of party, worse. Right? People have lost faith. But there was one group in this survey that a supermajority, 67%, said they trusted. And that was local government.
That's fascinating. And that really jives with some of the data we've seen here. Over the past year, 2 separate occasions, we did polling on various topics. And part of that polling, one of the questions that we threw into each of those polls had to do with, approval rating for City Hall, for the city of Yucaipa. And in both cases, it was right about 70%. I think the first one was just under 70%. The second time around, it was right at 70%. And if you were to ask a member of the city council, a member of the staff, what they thought that number would be based on the STPs, based on the comments that are made at the podium during city council meetings and the comments that are made on social media, you'd probably be in the 30s.
That's right. So,
but that's not the reality.
Yeah, and this is the point. Like, one thing I've learned, and I started my career in television and film, right? Not a particularly data-centric world. When I left my city council seat to take the job at Vimeo, I learned an entirely different way of thinking about storytelling in media, one that was data-informed. We use data to make decisions because we have much more access to it on the platforms, and local governments have that access. If you pay attention to data, sentiment, trends, people's responses through sharing, and we're going to talk about that in more depth in a minute, you can actually start to see that yes, the vast majority of people feel positive. But, and we're going to go back now to the STPs, local governments make a very bad choice when it comes to how they engage with this group. And the choice they make is the engagement, right? One of my dearest friends has a very simple golden rule: incentive dictates behavior. Now, my belief is that there are 2 types of people who engage specifically in local government social media. One is doing it for the right reason. They have a question. They're genuinely seeking information. I noticed that this road is closed. How long is it going to be closed? What do I expect from my commute? Because it's delaying me and I might be getting in trouble with the boss. Like, what should I expect?
Right.
Those people are the ones you want to engage with.
They're genuinely
seeking information, and we
Right.
want to engage with them.
Right.
The other is simply seeking attention. And this is where the rub is. This is where the rubber meets the road, or where the rub in this situation, which is you want to correct misinformation. It is a natural instinct. Somebody says something disparaging towards you, towards your staff, towards your city, and the first instinct is they're wrong. You have the facts, you have the data, and you respond. Here's the facts, here's the data. You have given the STP exactly what they want. You have given the drug addict a jolt of crack cocaine. They will respond with more misinformation. You will correct it. They will respond. They are doing it for the attention. And by you as the official body, whether that's an elected official or that's a member of city staff, responding is only giving them the validation and attention that they want. So in both instances, and I really want to turn away from what I call the social media 1.0 platforms. This is Nextdoor, this is Facebook, this is Twitter. Platforms that were developed or intended for a world before mobile, before phone-centric communications.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk about the triad, which is Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube in a little bit. But everybody's giving their attention to Facebook. And falsely, again, the data does not show that Facebook is the most demographically relevant platform. I hear from electeds all the time, well, our audience is on Facebook. I also hear from electeds and others in government, well, everybody's reading the local rag, whichever that is, whatever local... 4%, according to Pew, 4% of news and information is received in print.
4%.
4%.
Wow.
It simply is, again, in the same way that the 67% jives with your data. When people say instinctively, oh, well, they're getting this is where they get... Look at the data. Like, be agnostic. I know you might read it, and certainly, and I've been an elected official, we read everything. We're sensitive. We're egotistical. So we're picking up the local rag and making an assumption that everybody is getting their information. We see the people at council griping at us. That must represent, like, it's not true. Go to the data. And so the best way, this is my first sort of tip of the day for anyone dealing with this. Whether you're seeing somebody that is seeking information or you are seeing somebody that is seeking attention, there is a simple solution to defang the STPs. And that is, instead of responding in a comment, send a DM. Here's the information about the road closure. Now, this does something very special for the person who's seeking information. You've personally responded to them. You're not just in a comment lazily adding information. And I know the intent is like, well, if they're asking the question, somebody else is asking the question. We'll touch on this in a second. But they feel a personal, oh my gosh, they actually took the time to write to me as an individual and give me information. So check mark, big gold star for you. When a person seeking attention does it, you're going to respond to them. Now, they're going to do the same thing, and that's the trick that they want. They want to get you into a dialogue so that they can screenshot your direct messages and then post them. Do not let them.
Yeah.
Correct the misinformation. If they do it again, ignore them. Guess what? They're not going to post that. That's just too much, it's not how this works.
Right.
And eventually they go away because they're not getting the drug of your attention. Now, the last piece of this is, but if they're saying it, how do we respond? Respond with content. Content is more powerful than comments. So if you're seeing a bunch of people spread misinformation, figure out your content strategy of how to correct the record and do that again and again. And this behavior, when it becomes a habit and you get to doing it well, mitigates your STP problem on these 1.0 platforms.
So you're going across the country and you're working with cities and not just the staff, but also the elected officials, correct? So I'm curious about your approach with this because in talking about the STPs, I believe your strategy is correct. The more that you give attention, the more it feeds on itself, right? But I think, a lot of the times it's difficult, especially for elected officials, not to respond, not to reply. A lot of and it comes from a good place, right? A lot of elected officials, they run with a heart for service. Their job is to represent the community, right? And so it goes against their nature to not respond, to not give attention to those same 10, 20 people that are constantly reaching out to them, that are constantly showing up. And, I often have this conversation with elected officials because very often elected officials' views on community sentiment can be influenced by what they read on social media or what someone who steps up to the podium at a city council meeting says. But I try to remind them that these same people over and over again, and to the extent that you give that person or those people influence, you are likely not their views are likely not representative of the vast majority of the population. Here in Yucaipa, we have about 55,000 residents. We have about 20 people that show up on a regular basis, right? And those 20 people are typically of like mind on issues. And so that one group of SDPs gets an awful lot of space rent free in our council members' heads, and an awful lot of I don't know if influence is the right word, but it enters into the thought process maybe more than it should. And it's hard, I think, as an elected official who is motivated to represent the community to sit up there when you've had 20 comments on one side of an issue and then vote the other way, right? Because your job as elected official is not to stick your finger in the air and see which way the wind's blowing, or to be told what to do by one interest group of people. But so I think it's hard for some people to keep in mind that, listen, this is a representative form of government. I was elected by all the people in my district, and there are 55,000 people in the city who I'm responsible to. My job is to study, understand this material backwards and forwards, and then make the decision that I believe is in the best interest of the city, even if that goes against what the 20 people that showed up at the city council meeting have stood up and said.
Yeah, look, this is the other thing that makes me a little crazy, which is I hear from cities, and we just mentioned this about the local rag and Facebook and why they're on there. They're making a conscious choice to live in the world that these people inhabit. And they're also making a conscious choice like, well, TikTok, there's no people here in our community that listen to TikTok. No, TikTok's average age is like low 30s. In young cities, like Cathedral City, where I serve down the road, the average age is 36.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
You think that, maybe they might be watching TikTok a little more than not. Right. The idea of using a more broad-based social media strategy, leaning into this triad that I'll talk about, is about reaching a larger demographic of people who aren't the usual suspects, to get them engaged, to get them to come and participate, to inspire them that their local government is doing awesome things and to want to be involved. I mean, who is going to want to get involved in local government if they're hanging out in the Facebook groups or on Facebook or on the city's page and seeing all of the stuff that's happening? You're going to get these STPs. And the other thing, you and I both come from, a mixed background. We've both done public service and we've both done the private sector. One of the most important things to me when I was a council member, and I know because I've listened to your podcast, one of the things you pay a lot of attention to is being responsible for taxpayer dollars.
Yes.
One of the things that surprised me most, because I always thought that the benefit of, like, when I talk to governments and say, like, and they're like, well, why should we pay your fee? Like, what's the investment return? Like, how are we going to make our money back from, or show value to the taxpayers? Yeah. Certainly, transparency, better communication, all the things we've talked about a little bit here thus far, good check marks. But the thing that surprised me, and I'm like, oh, this is actually the biggest return on investment. And I would say that recruitment is something also high on the list. Like, I'd say transparency is a good ROI, but it's not the ROI. My very first client, when I came in, I met with a city manager and talked about what he thought and what staff thought were the problems. And then I went out in the community and just went to some local restaurants and talked to people. Where are the local hangs? What are people thinking about? And I got a different set of feedback because I was just asking random people who were just living their lives in this particular city.
Interesting.
And I came back and I said, what I'm hearing a lot from just asking people who don't know me as an elected, I'm a guy from Florida who's hanging out in this city. just asking questions, and they're saying this. And they're like, yeah, I think that's probably a priority. That's not what people talk about. I said, well, let's test something. Let's test a theory while I'm here. Post something about this topic. Highest performing post they'd had in a year. Now, why do I bring this up? It's being responsive and actually running a social media program that is effective and is not just kowtowing to this STP problem is about spending taxpayer dollars effectively. Because if those 20 people are distracting you as a city manager and all of your staff, and you're spending all of your time, and what cities spend money on is people.
Yeah.
And if people are spending time on something, those are tax dollars that are being spent.
Yes.
And so you're wasting tax dollars chasing these interests that have nothing to do with what people actually care about. If your social media is connecting with people who are sharing in a positive environment that they feel welcomed in what they care about, and when I say sharing, again, we're going to touch on this, that's my key metric. What are people sharing? Not what people are commenting on, but what is it, the content that they are sharing with their friends? It's a different way of thinking about social media. All of a sudden, now you see priorities that the community actually cares about. Now you're dedicating tax resources to the things that your taxpayers want you to be focused on. So this is an investment. Running social media in a modern, effective, thoughtful way is an investment in prioritization. And man, oh man, if you prioritize for the taxpayer, you are going to be rewarded. They'll see it.
Yeah. No, that's incredibly important. You're right. So you've talked about this shift away from Facebook, which is really focused, their algorithms are focused on comments, right? To Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, right? Interesting phenomenon that's happening in Canada and is making its way down here. The local government's turning off the comments particularly on Facebook, right? The idea being that there are better, more effective, and healthier ways to share information, right? Also, with laws now that are requiring archiving of comments, that becomes a cost and a task that has been. What are your thoughts on that strategy?
So, in order to understand social media and its impact and measure it, you do need some metrics. Now, again, shares, and when you're on the platforms that actually matter today, shares are going to be the thing that are going to tell you this whole story. But if you're choosing to be on Facebook, I think it is a mistake to turn off comments. And you can't turn off comments, I don't believe, on Nextdoor. I'm not sure. I don't spend a lot of time on that platform because it's worse. But what I describe both Facebook and Nextdoor as, once you've dispatched your SDPs, which means now you're responding to their comments in DM and you're defanging them and you're sort of dialing it down. If it's not dialing down, if you're trying that tactic, try that first and give it 6 months to a year to really see if that is going to solve the problem, or at least it's never going to solve it 100%, but it might mitigate it significantly. We've seen that with our client cities, right? We see immediate mitigation. If you turn off the comments completely and you don't try to mitigate the negativity, what you're doing is basically putting cotton balls in your ears and saying, we just don't want to hear anybody. Because if you're running 1.0 social correctly, it's actually an effective listening tool, because those people we talked about earlier that are seeking information are going to be on there and they're going to want it. And now they don't have a tool to connect with you in a medium that they feel most comfortable. So I think now there are probably communities out there where the negative toxicity is so significant and that they've tried mitigation tactics and they reach a point where it's just not worth it. Then I think it's fine. But I almost think in that instance, just shut down, archive your Facebook, because we have to keep it up there for public record. Just put a note on the thing saying we're no longer on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on TikTok. Follow us on YouTube. Because if you've gotten to that point, you shouldn't invest another penny in that platform, because it's just not, the return on investment is too low and it's too demoralizing. And so walk away. Right. But comments are not, comments are a symptom of the disease. Like you either have cancer and you can cut it out and you can continue to live, or it's stage 4. And unfortunately, the patient is going to die. And to me, the patient is Facebook.
Right, right. Let's talk about another platform. You put a lot of emphasis on TikTok.
I do.
And I'd like to hear about that. But also, there are a lot of security concerns that people have about TikTok. And in some states, government isn't allowed to use TikTok at all.
State government.
That's not the case in California. I imagine some local governments, if they start using TikTok, may get a little bit of blowback from the community on engaging on TikTok.
Yes.
Have you encountered that?
So a lot of them are, it's interesting. When I've met with some client cities that we haven't yet served, I was talking to a client in Kentucky, and they want to be on TikTok, but they're worried, about their interpretation of state law, and they have permission. I showed them the law, and I walked them through the bill that is signed. So, and even in Florida, which is the most draconian of the TikTok bans at the state level, still has ways for local government to engage. So there's not a state I am aware of. Maybe Texas. I've not yet had a client in Texas, and I've not yet had the opportunity to look at their law in depth. But most of these bans in the 17 states that have banned it have allowances for local government, or at very least public safety, to engage on TikTok. You mentioned the security concerns. And look, TikTok is today owned by a Chinese corporation, which means the Chinese Communist Party has significant access to the platform. That comes with potential security concerns. I actually think that the biggest concern, as somebody who's run a social media platform and has seen what access, like when I was at Vimeo as the general manager, as the leader, I had a certain code where I could go into the platform and I saw everything.
Really?
Everything. And everything's uploaded, whether it's deleted or not, like it's there. It's in the servers, it's somewhere. Like we can, who watched what's the patterns? Like we need to see that information to understand how the algorithm's working, how to tweak the code. We have legitimate reasons to get into the platform. But when you have 35 million Americans sharing their intimate lives, that's probably the larger concern as far as what the Chinese government can see.
Well, it's interesting because, I think there is a concern that, people are going to share things they shouldn't be sharing that may reveal some kind of national security weaknesses. But I think there's also the concern that, look, this is on everybody's devices, and maybe there could be some kind of malware or something that goes out and
correct. So
crashes
we'll talk about, because that's the stated concern.
Right.
The actual concern, and I do believe that and this is a bipartisan issue. Like the Democrats and Republicans agreed, like we need to force the sale of TikTok. I do not believe that TikTok will be shut down. There are too many Americans today that make their living on the platform. Hundreds of thousands of small businesses have now popped up in TikTok commerce.
Really?
Yeah, it is a big economic engine, and also, all the young people get all their content. Like it's like saying we're going to shut down, the 3 major networks, like where the old folks get their news and their TV. Like you can't, the blowback, whether it's Biden who on the 19th can shut it down or Trump on the 20th who could we do need to force a sale. I don't know how you do it. That's a 2 cars, playing chicken with each other, and we'll figure that out. But we need TikTok to exist. My bigger concern as it stands now is the psychology and patterns of American behavior is now well known by the Chinese government, because they can see all of the things. We talked about data. One person doing one thing is one thing, but when you see a lot of things happening, people doing their perceptions of things, how they think about things, like that's a lot of psychological information that has nothing to do with malware. It's just the ability to monitor and look at patterns and trends. And of course, with AI, we can do a lot more with that today than we ever have before. So that is, as far as like an American who thinks about security and TikTok, those are the things that keep me up at night. Now, the malware question is an interesting one. And I tell my clients, look, if this is a concern of yours, there's a very simple way to mitigate. Don't commingle sensitive systems on a phone that's being used to capture content for TikTok. Don't have your email server. Don't have access to your files. Don't have any of your systems. If that phone is simply purchased at a Verizon or T-Mobile or AT&T store, It is only connected to the 5G that it comes with as a part of its network connection. And it is used to create content. And you upload that content from that phone to that platform. Your security risk for malware is zero.
Interesting. Okay, so what makes TikTok so powerful? Why go through all of that at all if there are other platforms?
So if you pay attention to social media, I'll try to make this in the most layman's terms possible. Maybe you don't have a TikTok account. Maybe you just, it's too newfangled or whatever. You're on Instagram, you're on Twitter, you're even on Facebook. How many times when you're on these platforms will you be watching a very entertaining and engaging video, and at the end of the video, it'll go bloop, and you'll see the TikTok logo?
Oh, all the time.
All the time. Why is that? Because TikTok was the reason that TikTok caught Meta by surprise, like you don't catch Mark Zuckerberg with his pants down very often. You have to be very clever. The way they did that was tools. TikTok created a number of creative tools and ways to make content fast, interesting, and viral that didn't exist on any of the other platforms prior to TikTok's existence. And what that means is that if you're trying to create things, if you're a creator, you want to make something that's going to touch and engage people quickly, you go to TikTok first to create. And that's why I always think about TikTok as the center of the universe, the sort of key pillar to the triad. Because if you're using TikTok's creative tools, you then you're porting that to Instagram and you're porting that to YouTube Shorts, meaning that from a staff perspective, you're making one piece of content, but you're hitting on 3 platforms. You're tripling your impact. Now, if you make that content on Instagram or you just make that content and try post, you won't have the same creativity that TikTok facilitates. And that means the content will be less effective. So this is why I find TikTok to be indispensable. And I'll go to Bleacher Report. I owe so much of my success at Bleacher Report to the advent of TikTok right at the time that I was coming on board, because I saw, oh my gosh, this makes all the clever people in my organization. We had the most clever. I mean, I was paying my social media folks a lot of money because they were very clever. I'm like, this puts them on steroids. This gives them the ability to make it faster, to make it more clever. They can do it. They can manipulate it and make it exactly how it should be. TikTok understands the language of social, and this empowers the people that are working for me to make better social content. So TikTok became the center of our ecosystem, and that's why Bleacher Report, when I started, had 30 million cross-social followers, and 2 years later, we had 110.
Wow. That's impressive.
It's a powerful platform.
Interesting. Sam, you know more about social media communications than probably anyone I've ever met, and you have a really interesting background. And I'd like to dig into that a little bit. All right. So you got started in marketing, is that right?
I did.
Okay. Paramount Pictures.
Yep.
Warner Music Group. What type of marketing?
So, obviously when a movie or a CD at that time, because, you and I, 74, 76,
Oh, yeah.
We remember physical goods. I started my marketing initially in theatrical, but then moved to music and then home entertainment. So I was marketing those physical discs of movies and TV shows. I actually, fun fact, one of the godfathers of something that's long since passed, but the idea of binge watching. I take a little bit of credit. The people at Fox, someone in my role at Fox had the idea around the same time. But back in the old days when there were VHS tapes, TV was not really a thing because you could only really put 2 episodes onto a tape. And if you had to put the whole series, you'd have a brick the size of this table. But DVD allowed us to put multiple episodes, I think between, if it was a half-hour show, 8, and if it was an hour show, 4 episodes on a disc, and they were thin and they could be put into a set. So I was the Star Trek brand manager when I was at Paramount. And we were selling DVDs the same way we sold VHS, 2 episodes at a time. And I said, why don't we just put them in the season, sell them the whole season? And they said, well, we're making a lot of money. It's $20 for each of these discs, and you'd have to charge. I'm like, they're Star Trek fans. They'll pay whatever it costs.
Yep.
And so we did. We put Next Generation, original series, we'd done the 2x2. Next Generation, we did the box set. We made more money at Paramount selling Next Generation than we did The Godfather when it first released on DVD, which is one of the most iconic properties. It had the highest target for how much money we were going to make on it. and we blew them out of the water. We sold a ton of that plastic. So clever, creative marketer. But, I realized when I was working in Hollywood that all of this sort of power surrounded the creative process. And so I had to find a way to get towards the creation of content versus just being the person who was promoting the content.
Right.
And after I left the sort of marketing world, I jumped into a business development role at Fremantle. Fremantle produces American Idol, The Price is Right, Family Feud, all of these really iconic shows.
America's Got Talent.
America's Got Talent is another, big shows. Yeah. Business development meant monetizing off from not marketing and not television. So when you see a slot machine that says The Price is Right, I was involved in one of the early deals. The first mobile games, when mobile was still not iPhone, but they were kind of clunky, flip phones. We had mobile games for Family Feud. It was making us a fortune. I was involved. Price is Right Live, a live stage show, which we put in Vegas, and it was very successful. I was on the team that was involved in doing that. Like anything monetizing outside. The benefit for me is I was touching this new world of digital, right? We got to do stuff that no one else was thinking about. And when I was at Fremantle, I said, streaming is going to be the next thing. The problem with the business model, like I knew subscription streaming made sense. The financials were ridiculous. It was a great business model. The problem we identified, and this was before Netflix existed. Netflix was a business selling DVDs, but it didn't. This Netflix we know today did not exist. And I said, the challenge we have as a company is no one wants to watch their content on a computer. They only want to watch it on TV, and that's normal because we spend all our days on laptops. And when we get home, we just want to veg out in front of a TV. The company that figures out streaming is going to, the technology of connecting the idea of streaming IPTV onto a television that could be then facilitated through a subscription model is that's the game, but we're not a technology company. And then a couple years later, Netflix did exactly what I had sort of pitched in my deck, bought stock and signed up. I'm probably among 300 or 400 people that was one of the very first people to sign up for the digital only streaming product that was Netflix. And it was so bad. You cannot imagine how janky that was.
Oh, I remember.
The content was just atrocious. I sold them a bunch of content, by the way, made a lot of money with Netflix in those early days. But I was so fascinated by this notion of like somebody's done the technology, and I've been a subscriber since. So like they call these cohorts, like cohorts of subscribers. I'm the oldest cohort of Netflix subscribers. They should have thanked me, but I thanked them because I made a lot of money on that stock. In any event, right? Became fascinated with streaming and built a streamer. I actually left Fremantle to go to a company called Gaiam to build a niche streamer in the yoga, sort of high-minded lifestyle space. And that was very successful, still exists today as a company called Gaia. They've sort of pivoted a little bit towards conspiracy theories and aliens, which is interesting and is making them good money. It's a fascinating business. But then I got hired by Vimeo. So
yeah, hold on a second, because before you got hired by Vimeo, about 2010 timeframe, you had what I would consider a pretty serious lapse in judgment.
Okay.
And you got involved in local government and politics.
It's true. Yes,
yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You ran for and was elected to the city council in Cathedral City.
I was.
How did that come about?
So I've loved politics. So I wanted to go to school. The funny story is, when I was a little kid, and still to this day, I am probably most fascinated by complex puzzles. I play with Legos to this day. I have them on my Christmas list. So if anyone wants to buy me a Christmas gift, Legos is always welcome at my house. And the airline industry actually fascinated me most. It's the most complicated puzzle in enterprise there is. You have every single piece of equipment. Every plane is 70, 80, 100, 120 million dollars for a single piece of equipment. Airlines run thousands of these things. And then you have unions, and then you have local government and airport authorities and international authority. I mean, just the fuel hedges and fuel prices. And it's just such a puzzle. And I was so fascinated as a 16-year-old Sam, I'm going to become an airline CEO. So much so that I selected the University of North Dakota to begin my undergraduate studies because they were one of only 2 schools in the country that had a specialty degree in airline management. So I went to school, and thank God for 4-year universities giving you a diversity of education because you have to take your prerequisites. And I didn't love the coursework in the aviation track I was on. I just was not finding it engaging in my mind. And one of the things I tell younger people that are going into school is about training your mind how to think. Like there are some athletes that are swimmers, and there are some athletes that are linebackers, and there are some athletes like Josh Allen, the greatest quarterback to ever live. I'm a Bills fan. Like that are quarterbacks. Your mind is the same way. You have from genetics or whatever certain things, upbringing that your mind really works and clicks with. And for me, I realized through my prerequisites that was political science. I became super fascinated with the workings of politics, the workings of government, and then switched majors. And I was like, I got to get out of North Dakota. It's way too cold here. So I went back to Buffalo, which is balmy in comparison, and finished my degree in my hometown of Buffalo, New York. And I got a political science degree and then went to LA and did this media thing. And so I was like, well, I guess I'm never going to use my political science degree, but I've always been fascinated. I follow politics. I find it interesting. And when I left Los Angeles and got the opportunity to move to the desert, which was a smaller area, you can't really engage when you're in a large city with local government. It's too big. I mean, the commissioners in LA or the council members represent more people than a congressman. It's just not practical. But in a city, Cathedral City, same size as Yucaipa, right? 55,000 people. Now I could get engaged. So I signed up for the marketing committee because I had this marketing background. And I sat on the committee, all good intentions. I want to help Cathedral City be better. It's the place I've call home. I want to be helpful. And every meeting of the marketing committee, which is volunteer, I'd propose something, someone else would propose something, ideas would be bandied about. We had this poor, timid staff person, and every idea that we said, they would say, oh, Kathy won't go for that. Greg won't go for that. Chuck will hate that. I'm like, who are these? Who are these people? Oh, those are our council members. Every idea was going to piss off one of them, and the staff member was certainly not going to get themselves in trouble because you don't want to make the council annoyed by this damn marketing commission, right? So I said, hell, if I can't make an impact in my local community, I'll just run for council. And so I did. And so I won. And the reason we're sitting here today is because I was inspired by my public service. I got to see the work that local government does from a very close-up perspective and an intimate way. And I never really thought about local government because in poli-sci, you're thinking about Congress and the Constitution and the Supreme Court and the presidency and campaigns. But local government's special. I got to see it up close. It touched my heart. It was probably the most important work I'd ever done until this point. And it stuck with me. I wanted to be involved in local government. But sometimes your career and an opportunity to run a social media platform in 2014 came about, and so I left.
And that was Vimeo.
That was Vimeo.
Well, we like to embarrass people on this show, and
Please.
we did find an article from 2014 when you were leaving the city council. Let's put that up on the screen here. Now, look at
the hair.
Well, that's what's telling to me about you had hair.
I did
back then, not a lot, but some.
Yeah, no, I look. That is it's weird to look at yourself.
Right, that's 2014. It's 10 years ago. Yeah. Now, did you leave before the end of your term?
I did.
You did.
I did. September. My term was up in December.
Okay,
but I left in September.
Okay, but you got an incredible opportunity to go to New York.
Yes,
and at Vimeo.
Yes,
yeah.
I traded in my beautiful home in the desert with 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms and a pool and a yard and a grapefruit tree for a 600 square foot. It was my 800 square foot apartment in New York that cost me 4 times as much.
Well, was it a good experience?
Amazing. I got to work for Barry Diller. Now, your audience probably doesn't know who Barry Diller is.
I don't know who Barry Diller is.
You don't know who Barry Diller is?
I don't know.
You gotta look up Barry Diller. Barry Diller is so I've worked for a lot of people. I got to work for Mark Burnett, who created The Apprentice. I got to work for Gary Barber, who is the most successful CEO of MGM. Barry and many other luminaries and wonderful people in the world. Barry Diller is the smartest man I've ever met. Now, Barry Diller, a little bit about him. He was the youngest president of Paramount Pictures. He then was hired by a plucky guy named Rupert Murdoch to run Fox. Barry was the one who came up with this crazy idea, and it genuinely was crazy to create a fourth network. Nobody thought it was possible. I mean, it was absolutely the bravest new world thing that you could ever imagine. But Barry saw opportunity. He created the Fox network. Obviously, we know where that went. And then Barry was like, well, I want to run something bigger. He tried to buy Paramount Pictures and lost to Blockbuster and the Viacom group. And he said, screw it. I'm out of media. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to do something else. And he decided to buy the Home Shopping Channel. Now, I find this sort of fun and parallel in my own life right now, because everybody I have all of my friends who make big TV shows, and they say, don't you miss being in the business? Not at all. I don't miss it for a second. Hollywood is a really unique place, and I love my friends, but I don't miss the culture whatsoever. But people would have said to Barry, are you out of your mind? You ran Fox, and now you're running the Home Shopping Channel. But what Barry saw was this is the intersection of media and technology in its earliest form. The creation of commerce through media was really fascinating to him. And he built a company called IAC, which no one knows what that means or what that is, Interactive Corp. Interactive Corp is responsible for a couple little companies you might have heard of, which he created and then spun off, or created and still owns. Among them, Vimeo, which we've talked about, but also Ticketmaster, company called Match.com, company called Tinder, let's see, Expedia. Few small companies in that little mixture, all Barry Diller. So this is a man who was an absolute genius. And I had the privilege of working with him, working for him. Those were the most intense meetings I've ever experienced. Barry would bring friends. Like, he would surprise you and say, hey, do you mind if a couple of my friends sit in on the meeting? People like Michael Eisner, people like Scott Rudin, who's one of the most successful producers, one of the only 18 people living or dead that has an EGOT, Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, Tony, just happen to show up occasionally. Or Brian Lord, who runs CA, the most powerful talent agency in the world. Just pop in. But the privilege and honor of my life to get to learn alongside these folks. Barry hired a mentor for me, a guy named Garth Anseer, who's the most successful creator of television. He's made in greenlit shows from The Simpsons, Living Color, Cops, Buffy, Reba. His list of credits is incredible, and he took time to teach me about creativity and how to think about the creative process. I bring all of this passion and knowledge to my new work, which is mission-based. In Civi Social. It's part of the process that we've developed has been informed by these legends. It's not my brain that we're just borrowing. It's all of this knowledge that I've collected over the years of my career. But Vimeo was transformational in my career. It led to so much more. But here's the fun story about it. When I went to Vimeo, I had all the studio. I'd worked at Fremantle. I'd worked at Paramount. I'd come up with this box set idea. I was the hot guy in the industry. And I was like, I'm going to show these kids a thing or two about how media is done. And I got invited to something called VidCon, which happens in Anaheim every year in 2014, not too long after that picture was taken. And I watched a bunch of young kids, 12, 13, 14 years old, hordes of them, like the Beatles were in town. They were screaming at the top of their lungs, running in this convention center after another 13 or 14-year-old kid that looked just like them. I've never seen this kid. I don't know why are they screaming, running after this child? What the heck is going on? I realized after 2 days at this convention, I literally looked up at the ceiling of the convention center and said, everything I know about media is wrong. Because in 10 years, in 2024, these kids will be the primary consumers of media, and their relationship with media has nothing to do with what I have been trained in, what I do. And this is a parable for city managers at this moment, or anyone in government. Sometimes in your career, you've got all this experience and you know all these things, and you've built this career over decades, but technology can change it in an instant. This is the moment we face with AI right now. This is the moment we face with social media. And you can choose, like I did, to acknowledge your own vulnerability and say, I may have been great but I now need to start over and learn it, or you can hide.
Yeah. No, that's so from Vimeo, you spent some time at MGM, you went to Bleacher Report, and in June of this year, you founded Civisocial.
Mhm.
You've had a very successful career. Why Civisocial? Did it stem from your experience all those years ago, in Cathedral City, and realizing that, first of all, government needs help because government is doing it all wrong, almost across the board. What was the genesis of that idea to form Civisocial?
So I don't know if you're a man of faith. I'm agnostic. I believe in God, but I don't believe in religion. But I believe God plays an important role in my life, and it's happened on so many occasions. I've seen the act of God, so I believe in the power of prayer and of God and of divine intervention. And I'm going to say that this was kind of one of those things. I was very unhappy towards the end of my career. The last few years, I'm making a lot of money for billionaires and 100 millionaires or 500 millionaires. And that's great because I made a lot of money. I made so much money that I really didn't need to work again. Like, I didn't need to think about or be afraid of money. I could retire. And I did retire. I just sort of walked away and said, nothing I'm doing is making me feel good. There's nothing that's filling the thing that filled my tank for so long was innovation and chasing the gold ring. And often I've adopted rescue greyhounds, and I often say that people in their careers or in life, when you're chasing, we're all sort of trained to be these greyhounds. From the moment we're born, we're supposed to, as consumers, chase this mythical thing, this rabbit against the end of the stick. And the sad thing for the greyhound and the sad thing for us is you get to a point and you realize it was all a lie. You can never catch it. You can never get to that moment where you catch the rabbit. And I got to that moment. I'm like, wow, this is not right. But I love work. Like, my grandmother, when I was a little boy, would say to me over and over and over, she had two sayings. My favorite of her sayings was, whenever I would complain something was unfair, she would say, oh, honey, the fair comes in August. My second favorite saying, though, the thing I remember most is she would say over and over and over again, and she was a product of the Depression. She said, God's greatest gift is work. Remember, God's greatest gift is work. And I inhabited that mantra. I love work. I find tremendous fulfillment in it. So retiring was fine. I wasn't finding fulfillment in work, but I left and I had some calls for interesting jobs, and nothing spoke to me. And so I was just in the wilderness. Like, drinking Mai Tais by the pool is fine, but there's only so much Mai Tai one can consume in an afternoon. And my mom had called me, a few months before I decided to leave my work. And she said, God told me that you need to go back into local government. And my mom is close to 80, and sometimes, she's a little bit spotty. And I was like, this is just one of her moments of spotting. Like, well, how would I even, if I go back into local government as an elected, my husband will divorce me. He's already said it. He's like, once is enough for all of us for life. Like, we went there, we did that. We're not doing that again. I certainly have no qualifications to be a city manager. I'm not going to be a planner, putting on a police officers, none of it made any sense. I just couldn't understand why God would tell her this. And I just sort of wrote it off. So 3 months later, I retire, and now 4 or 5 months of sitting around, and I didn't know what to do. So one day I said, you know what? I'm going to drive to Buffalo. Buffalo is my safe space. I have a house up there. It's the stupidest investment. I spend 8-9 days a year in Buffalo, but I keep a house and pay all the bills and everything around it because I need that space for moments like this where I'm lost. And it was on the drive to Buffalo that this sort of moment of clarity came where it was like, hey, dummy, you're one of the better, most successful executives. I've given you all these blessings, all of this knowledge about social media. I've introduced you to Barry Diller. I've given you all this stuff. Over here is local government that really is struggling. This is a huge problem and pain. You need to figure out how to make this connection. And so for the rest of that drive, it was probably 6 or 7 more hours to Buffalo. All I could think of was like, what would that look like? And by the time I got to my front door, I was so excited. I called my former city manager and said, hey, if I brought this to San Clemente, I have this weird idea. You don't need to spend a dime on marketing. I hate marketing. I think it's totally ineffective in the era of social media. You shouldn't hire more social media staff because that's not the right approach. What if I told you you had everything you needed in the walls of City Hall? You have all the tools right now, today, to be successful. All you need is a strategic roadmap that's been built around social media and an empowered staff that's excited to execute against it. And I believe I can give this to you. And it will take me between 5 and 10 working days inside your city to do it. Is it something that you'd be interested in? He said, come immediately. I said, really? He goes, no. What you're saying, every city in America needs this right now. You have to come. I said, but I don't have a plan. I literally just got in the door. I've been thinking about this on a drive. Give me a minute. Took 2 months. Built Civi Social. I called him back. I said, I'm going to run this program for you for free because I have no idea if it'll work, but I think it will. And it worked so well that I was like, this is my life's mission now. And so today we've got clients, as I mentioned, from Connecticut to California and every state in between. Not every, I'm not 50 states yet, but I've got a lot of states. And we're only 6-7 months old.
That's incredible.
On this journey. And the thing about it is, the last city I was in, Collinsville, Oklahoma, the assistant city manager took me to lunch. He said, are you happy? And it was the wildest thing because for the first time in years, and maybe as long as I can remember in my career, I said, yes, wow. This work inspired seeing local government staffers, not the city manager, because I don't spend a lot of time with the city manager in this engagement. We set the goals. We do a couple sessions, but really it's on the ground with staff and with the communications team. And watching them light up and see hope for the first time and get excited and watching the outcome of when they're executing the plan. City managers talk. I was on preparing for another podcast and we brought one of our client cities. And I just seen a post from Conway, South Carolina. And the city manager was saying, social media is the most powerful tool for us to connect to our audience. It's the worst thing ever invented. It's ruined our staff's holidays. They feel terrible about themselves. Congratulations. You ruined Christmas for Conway. The next day I'm on this prep call with this podcast host, nowhere near as good as you. And my client, and I said, look, let my client speak about their experience. I talk a lot, as you can tell.
I've noticed.
And I wanted to get them the opportunity. And they said, social media has transformed our city.
Wow.
We feel great about it. Our residents love us. The staff feels motivated. We love this. We love social media. And I'm like,
I don't believe I've ever heard a local government professional say those words.
Mm-hmm. It's true. And it can happen. They see it and it comes to life. And it's like the Christmas miracle in It's a Wonderful Life.
And are you seeing that repeat? So you've been on the road with this program for 6 months or so now. You're here this week in the city of Calamasa, and I'd like to just shout out to Will Colbo and the city of Calamasa, thank them for hiring you and bringing you out so that I didn't have to pay for a plane ticket. You know, it's very thoughtful of them. But I mean, what has been your experience? Has that been that experience you described just repeated itself everywhere you've been?
It is.
Really?
And almost the thing that's most interesting is, like I said, the consistency of the problem. The surprise of the solution is equally amazing to me because. And what's really great for me as somebody who is a perfectionist and constantly improving, I've changed the program in every city that, like, I build a custom, every city is different. We build custom elements to the program in every city, but I learn things. Every time I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Now, my first 2 clients both had tax measures on their ballot. And the first client was San Clemente, the one I did for free, and I didn't know anything about this program. Then my next city, which happened to be Cathedral City, they're like, you know, what we'd love to do is have you train members of the community because we can't talk about our tax measure, but they can. And we have a few folks that are real boosters and we have people in the Chamber of Commerce, but like, can you teach them? Sure, I'll add it to the program. So they both had tax measures. San Clemente's got 64%. Cathedral City's got 74%. The reason is that difference.
Wow.
So now we know that works. And so we've added that, but we're always adding components based on feedback from our clients, and it makes the program stronger. So the only thing that's happening is every time I go to a city, they're wowed even more. They're just like, they're blown away by it.
Well, I think you've tapped into something very powerful. I think very often government, people that work in government, we're just kind of this faceless machine uh, to residents. We're not human beings, right? We're the government, and it's very easy to have a negative opinion and feeling towards the machine. But when you stop to realize that it's our neighbors, in Yucaipa, we have an unusually high percentage of our employees who live here in the city of Yucaipa. I think it's somewhere around 60% of our full-time employees that live here in the city. And so they're out in the community constantly. And in some respects, they're our best ambassadors, right? But I think what you're doing is brilliant, because by engaging the staff in each department, you might have someone in public works who's out working the job and they're filling a pothole, but then they're sharing that experience, saying, here's what we're doing today, for you, right? And then the taxpayer realizes, oh my gosh, these guys are working hard. This is how my tax dollars are being spent. And they get to know, Joe, the public works employee. And the staff become humanized, right? And it's just people that are doing their best, working for the public.
It goes back to what we talked about, that anonymity and the force of social media. It can work again in the opposite. It is so easy to attack a press release. It is so easy to attack the logo of the city of Yucaipa. It is so easy to attack a building and a flat post about a road closure, even if you use a Canva template and make it fun, right? Which they all do. Everybody found Canva, and it's like, oh, we can have these pastel colorful things where we say road closure and we have a little blinking light. It's so easy to attack that, because guess what's missing? The people. Remember I said you don't go up to somebody on the street and say, hey, you're a butthole and I hate you because it's a fellow human being. So I had an experience with a city manager that called me several months after the program and was like super excited to share this thing with me. It's like, what's the thing? We've been running your strategy, and somebody in the meeting put their hand up and were complaining about the trails not being maintained. Trails were a big thing. And 4 people in the meeting stood up and said, you're not paying attention to Mary. She's a wizard with a chainsaw. She is out there you're misinformed because you're not paying attention. And how dare you attack the work of Mary? Why did they come? They're not going to come to the city's defense. They're not going to come to that Canva post with the blinking light's defense.
Right.
But they've created a relationship with this person who they see as their neighbor, who is dedicated to working, and they see it every week, and they care about it because she's working on something they care about, and she's representing their interest. That's 67%. So it's really, really interesting to see people jump up in that meeting. The reason that the politicians are stuck with the STPs and it's really hard to make that vote because we got the STPs talking is because no one else is seeing anything. The work of your staff is amazing. You guys do the impossible every single day. Isn't it time that people saw it on a human level? And I love the fact, Chris, that you use the word neighbor. I met the former city manager of Fort Lauderdale, a guy named Lee Feldman, a smart guy. He changed the culture in Fort Lauderdale with a single word, and it was neighbor. He stopped referring to people in the city, the people as citizens or residents or whatever the terminology that we in government use to call the people that we ultimately are serving. And he just said, everyone is going to refer to people as neighbors because that's what they are. We are their neighbors. And it really changed I live in Fort Lauderdale. It is an amazingly I feel great about my local government. They do amazing things. They inspire me to continue my work. They're not great at social media, but one day I'll get in there and help fix that. But, you guys have to take a moment, everybody who's listening that's at staff or that's in local government, take a moment to reflect on the work you do and then think about what that would look like if everybody had a camera and could see it. That's the philosophy. It's not, what I'm doing is not Barry Dillard genius. It's just common sense.
It's pretty genius, I have to say. The first time I ever heard your name was on the City Manager Unfiltered podcast, Joe Turner's podcast. You were on, it was a 2-part
It's always
in-
two-part with me
interview.
because I talk way too much.
Well, this is a long form, so
yeah,
we just
that's
you know,
good. We can keep going.
right. But I think it was August that episode dropped, and it was right as we were getting ready to start this UKIPA 360 podcast. In fact, we had released a couple of teasers, and then I heard you on the podcast, and in early September, you had seen the teasers, and you sent me a message, and it was just very encouraging about what we're doing. I think you're on the right track, and then that opened a dialogue, and I started asking for free advice, which you were gracious enough to give, and we really appreciate that. But I'm a true believer in what you're doing. I've had between my private sector and public sector experience, 25 years working in and with local government. This has been a growing problem, and it's reached an epidemic level. And if something doesn't change, I really do believe it's going to unravel our system of government.
AI is going to make it way. I mean, we're not going to touch on this because that'll be 3 more hours of me talking, which no one wants. But we're just at the beginning. The tools available to people to manipulate media are on the horizon, and they're not coming slow. They are coming fast. Getting your hands around authentic storytelling using the faces of your staff before someone else creates phony faces of another staff and manipulates these video platforms.
Scary.
It's time to get on this right now.
Yeah. Well, Sam, I'm hoping that we can bring you out here to UKIPA to work with our staff in the near future. I know thankfully your business is booming. You're booked up months in advance, which is great. I'm very happy for you. It's because what you're doing is so badly needed, and you've really hit upon something here. And congratulations.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for coming out here. I mean, just I'm really, really thrilled to have you.
I'm a fan. Look, I give free advice all the time. My belief in marketing is awful. I bet every city manager gets bombarded by cold calls. I now that my business is taking off, I get B2B people trying to pitch me their crap. And I always say the same thing. I'm like, I will never do cold calls. I will never, on LinkedIn, for example, which is how we connected.
Yes.
I have a golden rule. And when anybody I don't know reaches out and I don't think they're going to spam me and don't immediately reject them, I send them a note before I accept. I said, look, I am all about connections. So if this is a genuine desire to connect with me, I will accept. But I have a rule. I never solicit my contacts, and I never accept solicitations from my contacts. If you find what I do is valuable and you want to work with me, I have done my job through content. And again, this is all how the power of social media works. But this cold calling stuff's like, I mean, if I had to pick a number one scourge in government, it's not social media. It's the people that are trying to sell you guys stuff.
I share that frustration. Yeah. Constant. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate you being here. Episode number 10 will drop in 2 weeks on Tuesday, January 14th. This episode drops on New Year's Eve. You have any big New Year's plans?
New Year's Eve. Look, I'm excited for 2025.
Me too.
I really am. I think there is, technology is, I find a new AI tool every day, and I'm genuine. I think that this technology is going to cure cancer and sooner than we think. I think there's a lot of negative to it, but I love New Year's because I choose to be optimistic every time New Year. So if this is happening in New Year's Eve, what I'm feeling right now in my future Sam self is what I feel every New Year's. The possibilities of what this new year will bring. And I always am hopeful about the possibilities. So I'm looking forward to the new year. I'm celebrating the possibilities. I hope you are too.
I am, yeah. My wife and I, we have a almost 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. And, life is busy, but I'm just, so thankful and grateful and really looking forward to what happens with them in the year ahead. And exciting things going on here in the city too. A lot of positivity. So,
well, you're going to be working with me in 2025. I don't know when in 2025, but we're going to figure it out.
Yes, we are. No, I'm looking forward to that very much. So, well, we hope everyone has a wonderful and happy new year. We wish you good health and happiness and prosperity in 2025. And thank you for watching and listening to UKIPA 360.
The streets are all aglow tonight in UKIPA, where stars are bright. The band is warming up the scene. We're ringing in 2025 so keen. Oh, glory waves above the square. In this small town with hearts that care, we toast to dreams and futures wide. In Yucaipa, we're filled with pride. Oh, Yucaipa, new and old, with stories fresh and tales retold. The future's shining like the dawn. We're stepping forward, bringing on. The fireworks light up the sky, reflecting in each hopeful eye. With every cheer and every kiss, we're building dreams we can't resist. From farming roots to bustling streets, a tapestry of warm heartbeats, each twinkling light, each joyous gleam. In Yucaipa, we live the dream. Oh, Yucaipa, new and old, with stories fresh and tales retold. The future's shining like the dawn. We're stepping forward, bringing on. The streets are all aglow tonight in Yucaipa, where stars are bright. The band is warming up the scene. We're ringing in 2025, so keen. Oh, Yucaipa, new and old, with stories fresh and tales retold. The future's shining like the dawn. We're stepping forward, bringing on.